All right. Well, welcome to our virtual happy hour for sustainability professionals. This is brought to you by JadeTrack. We host these quarterly. So if you enjoy this presentation, I will definitely send you an invite to the next one, probably in October. And if you would like to speak on a sustainability topic, or you know someone who is an expert within a sustainability field that you feel like others could benefit from their knowledge, feel free to reach out and nominate them as a speaker. This event is sponsored by JadeTrack. We offer reporting for organizations who want to harness their energy, water, waste data. We translate that into your Energy Star scores, your greenhouse gas emissions for really easy reporting. So if you know folks who are struggling with spreadsheets, who are manually collecting bill data, we can make that process really easy. And we work with ambitious organizations who are on a mission to advance that triple bottom line, doing what's right for people and our planet, but also saving on your energy spend and looking for opportunities to reduce waste. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tim here. He's going to share his screen.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Katie, and I appreciate JadeTrack presenting these sustainability happy hour sessions, and I'm honored to be speaking at the session today. Appreciate everybody who's logged in. It's great to hear from sustainability professionals all over the country, and I hope I can connect with some of you. I'll say right off the bat, this will be a brief presentation, but if you want to take a deeper dive, look at your waste stream, talk about your potential to compost, I'm always happy to do that. So I'll provide my contact as well. But I am the sustainability manager for Five Rivers MetroParks here in Montgomery County, Ohio. That is a slightly younger version of me in a compost bin at one of our demonstration gardens that was at Wagers & Gardens Metro Park some years ago. Composting is a big part of what I do with MetroParks, both in terms of community engagement in partnership with our solid waste district here in Montgomery County, as well as a pretty integral part of our waste management strategy and how we've been able to take at least a good portion of what we do to waste-free operations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get started with composting, some of the basic concepts, and then share a little bit about what we've been able to accomplish and what we're still working on. So just for a little bit of reference, Montgomery County, Ohio is in Southwest Ohio. If you've heard of Dayton, that's where I'm sitting right now. That's the kind of the epicenter of our agency, and we're just north of Cincinnati, if you're not familiar with Dayton. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Wright brothers were from here, so we've got a claim to fame in aviation. And beautiful parks. We've come to call this the Midwest, or the recreation capital of the Midwest, because we've just got so much going on here in terms of outdoor experiences to offer and a lot to celebrate. So I'll share a little bit more about that later. This is a map of our agency and all the different facilities that we run. So it's all centered around Dayton, but we have facilities throughout Montgomery County and even a few that border surrounding counties. Over 16,000 acres that we manage, and we're a 90-10 district, which means 90% of that land is managed for habitat protection or restoration. So it's just 10% that we do everything else in. First and foremost, a conservation agency, but we also run a public market. We have 2 historic farms, an arboretum, a formal gardens park, and some facilities downtown where we host community events, summer concerts, all sorts of things. So we're a very, very eclectic agency, and my position is broad and wears many hats, just kind of whatever needs to be addressed in terms of sustainability. So we're talking about composting today. Basically, this is a recycling program talking about how to recycle organic materials. And at MetroParks, we offer, in partnership with Solid Waste District here in Montgomery County, a 3-part, 6 cumulative hours program about composting. What I want to tell you right off the bat is you don't necessarily need 6 hours of education to do it. Composting is something that is fairly easy to accomplish on a basic level. That program gets into all sorts of interesting things about soil science and compost-centric gardening and regional waste management. And so there's tons of things related to compost and how that happens in nature and how it can happen in an artificial system that we discussed there. So you want to take a deeper dive, we do offer those programs online sometimes, and although they're catering to the Montgomery County citizens, you'd be welcome to log in. If you're interested in that, you can contact me. Why do we want to compost? You probably have at least one of these in mind, but this is a way to recycle and retain nutrients in the soil, especially when we're talking about managing growing systems. Carbon capture, a way to reduce waste, especially waste bound for the landfill, turn it into better soil, and ultimately reduce the use of chemicals in growing systems by building better soil and retaining the nutrients there. So this is just kind of a little anecdote and an insight into my world. This is part of one of our bigger compost systems. We've got several throughout our agency, but at Cox Arboretum MetroPark, we have a windrow system that I help to manage on about an acre of land. There's 5 windrows that look like this, relatively small, compared to industrial composting, but relatively big in terms of regional compost systems in general. I don't have a great camera on my phone, but we zoom in there a little bit. You can see a coyote in the background. I'm often out there, running a small tractor and a compost turner. I see a familiar blue racer snake that chases rodents, as well as that beautiful coyote that follows me around, just waiting for prey to get flushed out. There's insects crawling around in the compost. The whole food web is kind of existing back in this microcosm of my world. And I just bring that up to remind myself and to kind of convey to you all that composting is a familiar process. This is a form of biomimicry or ecomimicry. We look around the natural world, we see animal remains decomposing, leaf litter on the ground, the forest floor in action is composting. So that's what we try to replicate when we put a system together. So generally what we're teaching, because there are several methods of composting, what we teach the public and what we practice at MetroParks is aerobic microbial decomposition. Aerobic composting versus anaerobic digestion, which usually requires much more sophisticated and expensive equipment, but is a very good solution for large scale municipal waste. What we're talking about here is more day-to-day event waste, horticultural waste, that sort of thing. And as far as backyard scale or small business scale, aerobic composting would be the way to go. Aerobic microbes don't smell in the same way, they don't get off the odors that anaerobes do, so a lot less maintenance involved. And these are the basic ingredients to making that happen. Aerobic organisms, of course, that's what's doing the work for us in a composting system. And they need things like oxygen, water, carbon, nitrogen, and of course other smaller nutrients. But carbon and nitrogen are the ones we really pay attention to in a compost system. So a few examples of aerobic organisms. There's a Pseudomonas bacteria, there's an Amanita muscaria mushroom, type of fungi, and prints, just one of the most aerobic organisms I could think of that ever walked this earth. I'm a big fan, of course. I jest, of course, but this is just to say that people are aerobic organisms. We need the same things. When we're thinking about feeding our compost system, we simply think about the same things that any of us would need to thrive. So in a compost system, bacteria are doing the bulk of the work. They have the highest numbers in their colonies in a compost system and produce the heat that helps things to break down and potentially kill off weed seed, plant diseases, other things that might wind up in compost system that we want to destroy. So bacteria are very important and a big part of the recipe for getting composting done. But so are fungi. Fungi are very important, especially in being able to digest cellulose, hemicellulose, the plant fibers that bacteria cannot. So to get a complete breakdown, fungi are definitely a part of that. And one of the ancillary benefits of doing composting in a growing system is this introduces beneficial fungi into the growing system where the compost is applied as well. That can continue to unlock nutrients and in some cases even form these very visceral bonds with the plants growing there. That's a whole nother topic that I'd love to dive into, but we need more time. To allow fungi and microbes to thrive, we need to create an aerobic environment. We have to have oxygen there. So people think about maintaining compost and the work it takes to turn it over. on a regular basis, and that scares some people off. So I really encourage people, especially for a small scale, doing this at your office or in your backyard, you don't necessarily need to worry about turning a compost pile, but just have some way to drive oxygen into it. And so for a small pile, it can be as simple as having a pitchfork, or this is a compost turning fork in the photo here. And as the pile grows, maybe just driving a metal stake through it to create airspace and allow oxygen to proliferate, so that you get plenty of bacterial and fungi colonies growing, and you don't have a system that risks turning over to anaerobic conditions and creating lots of odors. Water is also a key component, and this is where most small composting systems fail. If I have guests or visitors at our parks who want to talk to me about a compost system they tried and it didn't work, it's usually because it didn't get watered. It's critical that the entire system stay hydrated. It doesn't take a lot of work. I like to show this picture because he's doing the right thing, just soaking that compost with the hose. And it's also a nice picture of just very easy DIY compost bay built out of shipping pallets. So I usually recommend that you scrape off the top few inches of a compost pile or bin and just check to make sure it's moist to the touch. If it's not, give it a very thorough soaking with a hose. Carbon, of course, is a critical piece of a composting system. All organic matter is carbon-based, so it's always present. What we're thinking about are carbon to nitrogen ratios and material that is carbon-rich, nitrogen-poor, and material that is relatively nitrogen-rich. So material that is older, plant material that has had time to lose its pigment to the atmosphere, is typically carbon-rich, nitrogen-poor. And we call those composting browns, which is sort of a misnomer. I'll revisit that in just a second. Nitrogen, of course, is a cellular fundamental. You have to have nitrogen to build protein, and microbes have to be able to build protein just like people. So nitrogen is found in the pigment of plants. And so fresh plant material, vegetable scrap, grass clippings, fresh leaves that haven't had time to dry out have a lot of nitrogen content. And so in a compost system, we're typically looking at a good combination of what we call composting browns and composting greens. Even though those are terrible misnomers, they've just become the common nomenclature for those two categories. Composting greens can be myriad colors: banana peel, orange peel, coffee grounds, which are actually brown, and just simply mean nitrogen rich, and the browns being nitrogen poor. I don't like people to get too hung up on composting greens and brown ratios, carbon and nitrogen ratios, unless you're really operating a commercial facility. Just getting a mixture of those two categories in your system is what you want to shoot for, and a good diversity of materials. So let's change gear just a little bit and talk about how we've accomplished composting at MetroParks and what role it plays in our waste management strategy. This is a picture of our compost setup for our main office in downtown Dayton. Very simple and pretty much a home scale composting system with a few bins similar to the ones that we give out for free to anyone that comes to the compost program we teach alongside the solid waste district. So we simply have collection bins in our kitchen area for leftover food scrap, shreds of paper that can't be recycled, and any other sort of organic material that collects. Got a policy that says if it's organic material generated on one of our facilities, it has to be composted. So everyone mostly complies with that, and we process it in a very small system outside. And that system takes very little maintenance. To do this for an office or for home, we're talking about maybe 15-20 minutes a week total work, and it basically gets folded into the routine of taking out trash and recyclables as well. Scaling up, this is just for the homeowner or business that has landscaping, gardening waste, a fair amount of horticultural waste to deal with. A larger system where you can have kind of successional breakdown or maybe store different materials in different bays is great. I highly recommend cedar board for building these for longevity, and slats in the front. If you can kind of see that, gates are very hard to shut Slat systems allow you to adjust the height of the front panel for these type of systems. So that's my kind of just pro tip on building compost bays. There's another set of bays we just installed at the demonstration garden at Possum Creek Metro Park, kind of a project in progress there. And they're great. You know, that pretty much takes care of all of the horticultural waste for about a 1/4 acre demonstration garden plot out there. And managing something like that is really maybe an hour a week. You know, there's a little bit more involved in making sure it gets really hydrated with water and that materials turn over a little bit more regularly. So we have a policy that says at MetroParks, if we're hosting meetings or programs, volunteer get-togethers that involve food service, we have to make sure we run them waste-free. Compostables are collected, recyclables are collected. We work with food vendors to make sure everything that they're bringing is either compostable or recyclable, and then have 3-bin systems like this one. This is at Cox Arboretum Metro Park Visitor Center, where those can be collected. So in a small setting, usually just good signage and a word from the organizer about where things go after you're finished eating is sufficient. We always preach reusable when possible, and we've actually even put together reusable wear kits for staff or volunteers to check out. If they are working in a facility where that's possible, you know, some of our facilities have kitchens, areas to wash up, or we even provide bus tubs and drying racks to do dishes by hand. It's always kind of an interesting social experiment to throw that into the mix at a luncheon or something. But a lot of that saved us a tremendous amount of expense and resulted in a lot less material going to the landfill, just because we've done that at our staff meetings. Scaling up a bit though, we are working on a model that we can use for all of our larger events. We do a lot of partnership events here, work with a lot of third-party organizers in our parks, and we don't necessarily have complete control over the waste stream of those events. But the largest one that we run in-house is the Wagner Subaru Outdoor Experience, which is a wonderful time if you're ever thinking about coming to benchmark things going on at MetroParks or visit Dayton, Ohio, and in the surrounding area. This would be a good opportunity. First weekend of October every year. It is back on this year after being canceled due to COVID the past 2. So the last time we ran this was in 2019. But it's an all hands on deck kind of event for our staff, and over 20,000 people typically attend. People from all over the country come to celebrate outdoor experiences and can try things like paddling, bicycling, mountain biking, slacklining. We've got a bunch of food vendors and beer vendors and live music from our local NPR affiliates. It's a great time, but it generates a lot of waste, as you might expect. So that's been our kind of testing grounds for waste free, and where we've been implemented collecting compostable on a large scale. So that's been a process that's evolved over several years. It's not terribly complicated, but it takes a little bit of work and organization on the front end to make that happen. Mostly working with all the food vendors to make sure that they are indeed vending all compostable ware. That means, you know, going over their supply lists ahead of time, making sure they're connected with the right vendors, and that there aren't going to be any surprises the day of. So it can be done. It definitely requires that either staff or volunteer staff oversee waste stations, because we found if you just put compost, recycling, and trash out in the context of a festival or an event, they all are commingled at the end of the day and very hard to separate. So we have volunteer and staff oversee 6 of these stations at this event, where we simply have tables set up with bus tubs that are labeled very clearly, and the public can get rid of their items quickly. That's kind of one key thing we learned. You don't want queues of people waiting to throw away their trash. They need to be able to do that quickly and move on and take their best guess. So they can take their best guess, and if they don't get it right, volunteer or staff person can easily sort it into one of those bins behind them and make sure that it goes in the right kind of liner. You keep everything color coded so all the park staff know exactly where things are headed. Green for compost, blue for recycling, dark colored trash bag for things that do need to go to the landfill. We aim for a waste-free, 90% or better to waste diversion is the goal, and we've gotten pretty darn close. This effort won an Ohio Parks and Recreation Association Award of Excellence this year after 2019. And we're very proud of that. It's kind of a big deal in Ohio, at least for our industry. So there's the breakdown of what we were able to accomplish. 2,200 plus pounds of waste collected at that event, and over 86% waste diversion. A big chunk of that is through our composting efforts and the ability to separate that stuff out and actually process it. So almost 1,000 pounds of compost was collected at that event, and that's pretty typical for the outdoor experience. And a few pictures of what goes on with event waste or waste we've collected from programs or meetings. It gets shredded up and incorporated into that compost system out at Cox Arboretum MetroPark, or more recently, we've started partnering with the Dayton Food Bank, who has a really great composting system as well. Just kind of depends on the scenario. That's all of that 1,000 pounds of food and serviceware waste shredded up after the event in a concrete bay there. It worked. We used a horticultural chipper shredder to do that back in the day. Now we have recently upgraded to a really nice industrial grinder. You don't have to have one of these to get it done, but for a large scale, it's been a great investment. And we received some grant funding from the Solid Waste District to help incentivize that program. So that cuts my time for an event like that in about a third, we're estimating, just because this grind is much more efficient than using a chipper shredder. I realized I didn't have a picture of myself running the row turner at Cox Arboretum other than this video that our community engagement coordinator put on social media. So that's a clip of that. I won't actually show the video now, but just to give you context, the system we're using out at Cox Arboretum MetroPark is basically small windrows, about 4 foot high, 6 foot wide. We turn them every other week or so, and I would estimate I have about 2 cumulative hours per week in maintaining this site. So it's not a tremendous amount of work. Utilizing that compost for other things, of course, requires other staff, but the sheer act of getting the compost done averages out about 2 hours a week. So a little closer look at that nice turner from Frontier Industries. You know, for anyone looking to really get a lot of compost done in-house, I think this is a great solution. This is not industrial scale. This is kind of parks and recreation scale, so to speak. And for a site that's, you know, maybe 100 yards or less material at any given time, I think this is an appropriate purchase. Not a terribly expensive machine. Those run about $20,000 to $25,000 depending on options. So one more view. That's our windrow system out there at Cox Arboretum MetroPark, middle of winter. View from my office away from the office on a crisp late spring day, I think, maybe late winter, early spring. And that's how we get it done. So there is my contact information. I'm always happy to take a deeper dive and maybe talk about how some of these same concepts could apply to your waste-free initiatives or anything you're thinking about. And if you'd be interested in attending one of our programs when we put it on online, can certainly invite you to that. Thought of a few different questions we might explore during the breakout session. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Katie.
Tim, thank you so much. That was awesome. I learned a lot and I'm inspired to try composting at my new home. Haven't started yet, but it seems very doable. You've made it seem doable. So I appreciate that. And a big shout out on winning that Ohio Association of Parks award for your zero waste events. We got some folks in the chat giving you some shout outs and also asking some questions about zero waste. So you definitely hop in the chat there and take a look.
Oh, fantastic, yeah.
So what's going to happen next is I'm going to send y'all into virtual breakout rooms. You can talk about composting if you'd like. And if you're lucky, you might get Tim in the virtual breakout room, the expert. But you do not have to talk about composting. Feel free to share other sustainability work you're doing within your organization. You know, we've got a lot of experts on the call today. So if you have questions, want to ask for advice, recommendations, like now's the time. Let's see, we have about 30 minutes. I'm going to say each breakout room is going to be about 6 minutes long, and then we'll go into another breakout room. So here's some of Tim's composting questions. If you'd like to go down the composting track, has your business started a composting journey? What kind of organic waste is generated at your place of work? Where would be a good place to start composting it? And do you perceive any barriers to accomplishing composting? What kind of assistance could you use to get started? So that's just some ideas for you if you'd like to chat about composting. And without further ado, I'm going to throw you all into some breakout rooms here.